Good morning. It is 7:52 a.m. on Sunday, August 2nd, 2020. I'm Christiana Ellis and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. And because it is Sunday, I am continuing my rewatch of The Legend of Korra with Book 2, Episode 6, The Sting. Yeah, so I'm definitely feeling complicated feelings because there's parts of this episode that I really like and parts that I don't like as much. Um, uh, but like at the same time, it's more just kind of a matter of when I was watching this new at the time, I felt like I was just loving every minute of it, having more stories in this universe. But like certainly over the years, like the critical consensus has come down on like the first half of season 2, not the best. And I'm kind of remembering why that would be, which isn't to say I'm not enjoying myself, but just like this is not the best part. Anyway, the one additional thing that I'll just kind of shout out is that the author of the essays that I mentioned last week, doing kind of a critical analysis of The Legend of Korra in terms of what sort of, lessons that it has in sort of like the sort of an ethnocentric approach of it. But in any case, the person who wrote those essays actually won a Hugo Award for a speech about changing a historic award related to the Hugos in order to make it more inclusive and forward-thinking. And so congratulations to them. But I mean, not that I have any personal direct connection to them, just other than it's like, hey, I just linked an essay by them. Sort of that thing. And in any case, let's talk about the Sting. So, we finished last time with Korra being swallowed by a gigantic ocean spirit. We only pick up back with her at the very end of the episode, so I'll just go ahead and cover that piece and then dispose with it since we'll be focused more on that next time. I will say I've reached a point in my life where it does not matter how well executed the trope is, that I just instantly roll my eyes anytime amnesia is introduced in a story. And again, I feel like I've had this conversation before with other people. It's not a reflection on saying like this use of it or that execution of it is bad. It's more just a matter of I'm tired of amnesia stories. I just wish that it feels lazy at this point. Like there are certainly stories where they do a good job telling a story with the amnesia trope, but I'm at a point where I almost always wish they would choose some other way to tell the story. In any event, we don't really spend much time on that in this one, and it's also, I recall, not a long-term thing for this story, so it's not a big deal. I'm just sort of, because I was already thinking about it when I watched that scene in this one, and Korra doesn't remember who she is, I was just immediately like, oh no, not amnesia. But it's not a big deal, really, honestly. So, but we spend most of this episode with Mako as the protagonist, and he's still trying to solve the mystery of who really bombed the Southern Water Tribe Cultural Center, because everyone is convinced that it's, the Northern Water Tribe, and they just have to figure out who. But Mako is starting to think that, there's more to it than that. It's suspicious, and he's trying to help Asami. Because, there's more, some of her ships are being robbed, the ones that she's trying to sell to Varric. And he is uncovering this whole conspiracy. And I think that there's a lot of elements of that that are actually pretty well executed. So we begin, seeing one of the ships be attacked. And there are some details about it. Where some details about the way the attack happens with some remote triggered explosions that are similar to the cultural center, and Mako again says, like, he saw a firebender do it. So why, this seems connected. And we also get a brief shot, sequence early on where Desna and Eska have to explain to their father where that well, we don't have Korra because she's probably dead because she got swallowed by a giant spirit. And then he's mad. So that's basically all we have there. We just have the check-in with them. But in the meantime, now we have the Bolin is a movie star plotline in full swing, and I'm a little bit. This is almost like a perfect encapsulation of kind of the issues with this part of the season. Is that much of the story is very fun. It's so silly watching these propaganda films get made. It's also a little bit insidious how we see the propaganda working. Like, even if we, the viewer, are sort of on the side that Unalaq is in the wrong here, seeing this caricature version of him being fought by Bolin, who is not from the water, the water tribe, we see how, like, that there's propaganda to it, right? Like, it's not real at all. It's manipulation. And it's fun and funny watching Bolin be a movie star in many respects. But then this whole plot line where he can't really figure out that Ginger is acting in love with him, but the real actress does not care for him, Bolin the actor, and him, like kissing her without permission in the scene just because he felt moved by it. Like, and so that part's not great. And so it's just an illustration of how a little thing, like, we wish that part wasn't in it because the rest of the storyline is fun, but you can't really entirely separate them, that sort of thing. Similar to Mako having, like, he's got this cool, like, he's trying to solve this conspiracy mystery thing, but then we also see him resort to, as a uniformed officer, he is doing, off the books operations, against his boss's direct orders, and then, threatening to burn off the toes of this low-level, triad guy in order to get him to spill information. And it's just like, cops shouldn't do that, Mako. I mean, obviously we could get into a whole thing about, police brutality and everything. But the point is, like, in the show, Mako's supposed to be the hero. And so he's doing stuff that is certainly not heroic in that regard. And it's because he's following these sort of lazy old tropes of the renegade police officer who will do whatever it takes to get the bad guy. And it's like, a lot of that wasn't great then, has aged even less well. So it's just these little pieces that kind of sour and taint the rest of the story, which is good. So, like, having, so the other piece that bothers me in that storyline is that Lynn is just the dupe here, right? Like, she's just given the role of telling Mako to get in line and do your job and stop making waves, but we, the audience, are shown, like, Mako's clearly right. He's being framed as the protagonist here. We see that these other two cops, Liu and Gong, are, like, they're obviously terrible. So why doesn't Lin see that? Why is Lin so antagonistic towards Mako's investigation here? That's frustrating because we like Lin and we don't want her to be the opposition here. And so that's just another element. But in any event, what we have is, the ship got robbed. We have, the first screening of the first Nuktuk mover, which is a lot of fun. I love just the animated depiction of this terrible old silent movie. Um, I like that a lot. But then we have Asami, and this is another element where it's just, it keeps having these things that just, we like Asami. We don't want her to, be sad and all of that. But like the writers in the commentary for this episode actually even make fun of the fact that like when she is distraught, she's saying, "I'm ruined because all of the stuff has been stolen." They're kind of like, "Poor little billionaire girl has lost her major corporation," and it's like, uh. So there's so much to like in these episodes, but some of it is not the best. But let's talk about some of the stuff that does work too. Um, Obviously, like I said, I've already said I really like the Nuktuk movers. I kind of like the plot line of Bolin getting celebrated as this movie star, even though I don't like the parts with him having boundary issues. But having, so Mako hears about the ship robbery and that there are these remote detonators, and he's still trying to solve this, even though he's getting shut down. And in the meantime, Asami is telling him how the ships keep getting robbed, and so Mako suggests there's a pattern to the way that these ships are getting taken. I bet we could set up a sting. Lin doesn't want to do it, so he decides to try to do it himself with Asami. And they're initially saying like, "Oh well, we would need help," but of course Varric shows up to help, right? We'll talk more about Varric in a minute. But so we have, let's see. Yeah, so Mako at this point does try to bring in Bolin, and there's sort of a nice framing of Bolin, now that he's got his own thing, shutting down Mako's requests for help. And I feel like there's actually good writing in the idea that they're both kind of right here, because it's simultaneously true that Mako did kind of just tell Bolin, figure out your own thing. Stop hanging on to me. Do you figure out what you should do. I'm not going to help you anymore. And that whole thing. And then now that Bolin is doing well and is successful, Mako is now saying, you should drop all of that stuff that you're doing and help me with the thing I'm doing. That's a little hypocritical, right? And so we can get that why Bolin would feel like the shoe's on the other foot now. But on the other hand, it's also true that Bolin, that it was shitty when Mako did it. That doesn't make it good when you do it. Especially since it's, it's, that's I think what's the good writing about it is that they both have a point, right? But in any case, Bolin refuses to help. So Mako decides to enlist the triple threat triad instead, to have some, muscle. Only to discover, first of all, the fun little side character of Two-Toed Ping, who is named Two-Toed because he has two extra toes, and he points out, well, yeah, and there was also already a 12-toed Ping on the South Side gang. So it's like, that's just a funny little silly bit of business here. But alas, it turns out for Asami and Mako's sting operation that the triads have actually already also been paid to just take Mako and Asami out and sort of ride them around for a while Asami's warehouses get emptied in the meantime. And it's all very frustrating. But we get a cool action sequence with Asami driving the speedboat away from the gang, the triad members who are pursuing them, and like that's a fun sequence for sure, where we've got the triad waterbender trying to wreck their boat, and Asami's awesome driving the boat around, and Mako's fighting back with the firebending, firing back, and that sequence is great. And then when they get back, and she's discovers, oh no, it's all of the stuff has been stolen. This is everything, and and there's a moment where Asami kisses Mako for helping, and it is super awkward because was not prepared for that and doesn't know what to do with it and gets super awkward. But Mako has his issues, but I think it's also true that he does have a pretty firm sense of justice here, in the sense that, he really wasn't helping her because he wanted something from her. He really was helping her because he cares about her and wants to do the right thing, and someone is getting away with something bad, and he wants to stop that. And so the idea that she's kissing him, like, because she's so moved by his help, I 100% buy that he's just really taken aback and doesn't know what to do with it. Right? It's not even connected to this idea of, like, is he prepared to or interested in rekindling their relationship now that he's broken up with Korra, but just that, like, that's really not where his head was at, and I think that's good stuff too. And then once and then I also really like, once we get past the let's torture this gang member for no purpose because he doesn't actually get any useful information from him. Mako goes back to watch Bolin on the mover set and sees the pyrotechnics being set off by the same kind of remote detonator. And that is great. That is such a cool, like, when you're solving a mystery, having the connection come from this surprising source, but having Mako be in a position to recognize, wait a minute, not only is this the same kind of thing, but it makes sense because it's Varric who needs all of the stuff that's getting stolen. Is he actually stealing it all to get around having to pay for the stuff that he was theoretically buying? And so only to discover when he goes to try to warn Asami that Varric might be in on this, only to discover she's saying, isn't it great, Mako? Varric just saved my company by purchasing a controlling interest. And so we're left at kind of a stalemate where Mako really suspects Varric, but maybe can't actually prove it yet. And so chooses to not press the issue just now, but obviously he intends to do something about it, and a lot of that's actually really good. And I want to talk too about Varric, who I think is actually really fun because, the red herring of Varric up to this point has just been that he is so silly and kind of ridiculous as a person that it's hard to imagine that he could also be this criminal mastermind. And yet, what I like about Varric as a character is that he is actually both, right? He is, the ridiculous stuff is not an act. That's also him. But he is just kind of a fundamentally amoral person who defines good and bad as whether it's good and bad or bad for him personally. Like, if it benefits him, then it's good. If it hurts him, then it's bad. And that, so we can see that for him, maneuvering this whole situation to where he has a controlling interest in the weapons manufacturing industry that helps him to buy weapons to fight the Civil War because that helps him financially. Yeah, so that's where it all kind of starts to fit together, and that's, the propaganda films feel even more insidious and all of that sort of thing, right? But what I actually love about it, and this, spoils a little bit that Varric is not just disposed of as a villain after this plotline, is just that it is kind of complex, right? Like, on the one hand, we certainly don't approve of him manipulating Asami and everyone in this way. Um, but it's also true that we're like that he's doing all of this because it's what he believes will help the South win this war, which is kind of the same side we're on, isn't it? So it's a question of tactics rather than sides in that sense. But yeah, it's complicated, and I feel like that's pretty interesting. And so yeah, so it's one of the things that we talked a little bit about last time, which is that one of the essays was all about the villains and how each villain kind of has something to teach Korra. Like, no, none of the villains are like 100% wrong. And I feel like that's good. And obviously, not all has yet been revealed from Varric here, um, but yeah, there's some interesting, nuanced stuff there. So next time we're going to have Beginnings Part 1, where we're going to have some lore drops about the very first Avatar. Now, I haven't watched these in a while. I remember liking them, but I also vaguely recall that they seem to retcon some of the lore that we thought we knew about all of that stuff in the previous series. I don't remember the details, but we'll talk more about that next week. And in the meantime, I'll talk to you all tomorrow for 5 more minutes.